Hey guys, Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Wolverine, issue number 1. I was terrified waiting for this comic book to come out. Why? Because aside from Nightcrawler, we didn't get a whole lot of Wolverine in these comic books, right? In the Hox Pox and the Dawn of X books. Even like he's on the X-Force team, we don't get a whole lot. What's going on? So I wondered why the book was taking so long, and technically the book should have came out last week in my opinion, but we'll get more into that when we talk about the second story in here. That's right, there are 2 stories in here. A lot of people probably wondering, why is it $7.99, Professor? Because that's the price of 2 comic books. Just saying. Anyhow, 2 comic books in here. Legit. So good stuff. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about Wolverine Through the Ages, a free comic book that if your comic book store doesn't have, you might need a better comic book store. I'm calling people out. Anyway, we're going to talk about all that good stuff. Let's talk about who made this comic book. We'll get a little bit more into both stories and get really deep into this. Okay, so Benjamin Percy is the writer. Adam Kubert is the artist. Frank Martin is the color artist. VC's Corey Petit on letters. Tom Mueller doing the design. Adam Kubert and Frank Martin do the cover. Whole bunch of variant covers on here. And Nick Russell does a production with the head of X being Jonathan Hickman. So Hickman is still in charge of this. This is still considered one of those Dawn of X books. This first issue is called The Flower Cartel. Mind you, that's the first story in this issue. There really are 2 comic books in here. You know how we got a whole bunch of cool images of Wolverine and Jean Grey and Wolverine and Kitty Pryde, and they're just hanging out, and we didn't actually, this was in the, I think this was all, for the most part, in issue number 1 of House of X and issue number 1 of the Marauders. We didn't get a whole lot of the backstory there, like what's Wolverine really doing in these books. None of this stuff makes any sense. Well, that's obviously because they were clearly holding off for this book. I'm happy that, you know, this is confirmed in this book. We also get something else from the Marauders. So if you're reading the Marauders comic book, or if you're reading this comic book, these 2 comic books are crucial to be reading. Probably more so than the regular X-Men title. I've been saying that the Marauders comic book is my favorite of these X-Men titles so far, these Dawn of X books so far. And Wolverine is starting to become a crucial, with the first issue, seems like it's going to be a crucial read if I really want to enjoy that story. And I really want to enjoy that story. It helps that I really enjoy this book also. You see, in that Marauders comic book, there's those white pages where it's all just text. And the majority, the bulk of that text is from a CIA agent who's hanging out in Langley, getting ready to throw things in the Potomac. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is in D.C., this is Langley, this is a CIA agent who seems to have a whole lot of funding, but seems to be left out a lot of things, and seems very askew from the norm of what we would expect a CIA agent to be, right? This guy is very weird. Holy crap, could we have actually met that person in this comic book? So, Bannister, what is this guy's name? Jeff Bannister is this cat who's a CIA agent, very different from the norm, wears Hawaiian shirts and all that good stuff, and long hair. However, seems to have a very vested interest with a very weird way of investigating things, right? This dude, he's got a personal investment in finding out about this new drug that has entered the slipstream, so to speak, because, hey, look, it turns out that there are bad guys all over the place here. You know how the Hellfire Club is involved in all of the transportation of the 3 drugs to these other countries that are supposed to help out these other countries in one way or another. You see, the Hellfire Club on the outskirts, you know, the white and the black, Hellfire Club, they are there to try and deliver drugs in one way or another, deliver these drugs to the peeps in order for them to, you know, recognize the sovereignty of Krakoa. But the Hellfire Club Red, that's where Kitty Pryde used to be, she's supposed to be there for the sake of actually delivering these drugs and to private places, all right? The behind-the-scenes stuff, and try and pull some people out, you know? Everything is about trying to recognize sovereignty and to get mutants out of these countries. If a country says, yes, we recognize your sovereignty, here are your mutants if you so choose, if they so choose, and yes, we will accept your drugs, cool, you get the drugs, no hassles. If you say no, well, then they're still going to deliver the drugs to your country. but they're going to deliver them to the local cartels and whatnot. And then these people are going to have a black market, independent view. Like they basically get this stuff exclusive. There we go. They get exclusivity to these drugs, and suddenly the status quo shifts because they have almost unlimited resources because people are going out of their way to get these drugs, not through the official chains, but through these guys. And then these guys help to smuggle out mutants back to Krakoa. So we may not get your vote of sovereignty for our nation of Krakoa, but we do get our mutants back, and you get destabilized. And maybe that shift of power allows for new people to take charge, and they will recognize our sovereignty. I love the politics of this. I could not love the politics of this more. That being said, Wolverine is involved in this, so is this CIA agent. Why? Because Krakoa, when they produce these plants, the plants themselves produce a lot of pollen. Pollen is the name of this new drug on the streets right now. And yes, it has everything to do with the Krakoan medicine. They're trying to find new ways to spread this stuff out more. Maybe they could cut out the main guy, the main supplier, and they could just reproduce this drug on their own. The problem is it does something else to people. You have to read the comic book to understand. I'm not here to spoil this whole book for you. I'm not sorry. You're welcome, actually. The book is that good. You don't want me spoiling this stuff. Anyway, for that understanding, Wolverine and this CIA agent on separate, eventually they're going to meet, I'm sure, and it's going to be freaking epic. But Wolverine and the CIA agent Jeff Bannister are independently trying to figure out what's going on. Wolverine comes across basically something really weird happens in the comic book, and there's this pale girl, and apparently she has something to do with everything that's happening here. And I could not be more curious as to what's going to happen next. Now, after that, there's actually a second story in here. Benjamin Percy is also writing it, but Victor Bogdanovic, whose birthday was yesterday, happy birthday, dude, he is the artist. Matthew Wilson is the color artist. VC's Corey Petit is the letterer, and Tom Mueller does the design for this book. Now, let me just reconfirm. St. Julian... Is it St. Julian? Yes, St. Julian. So, there is this story in this comic book that is not finished, okay? What do you call it? But Wolverine has to learn it slowly, and I'm sure there's going to be a twist to it, and I can't wait to see what that twist is. All that being said, this is basically Wolverine, and you get to see all of this stuff, again, in the Hoxpox books that led up to him hanging out. He's running around. He's chilling out with all these guys. He's doing all these crazy things. And what do you call it? Anyway, all this stuff that wasn't explained before, and here it's being explained. Well, something happens. We actually get a preview in this book of what happens. I'm going to show you it right here. The preview page, it's the exact same thing. This is actually from the book itself. But this is the preview page that's shown in here. So this is what you guys get. Omega Red comes through. This is a guy who's, of course, been looking for the carbonadium inductor, I think it's called, whatever it is, that allows him to not have to eat people, basically, in order to stay alive, using that death factor to stay alive. Wolverine was, of course, responsible for that. You get a good, it's not a solid, but a good understanding, enough to make you hungry for more, who is Omega Red, if you're brand new to comic books, or at least brand new to this character. So you get to see a good chunk of their history in here and make you want to go and start looking for more on this character. That being said, it's also not so slow that old school, alumni are looking at this and going, oh my God, I know who Omega Red is, move on. No, it's exactly enough to give you the key ingredients of what is important to remember about this character, because they get addressed by the end of this comic book. Like I said, this book seems to be all about changing the status quo and letting you realize who's really in charge of things. Now, I'm not here to give a whole lot of spoilers for what's going on, but by all means, please feel free to look up on the Catholic Encyclopedia, which is online, who St. Julian is, because that seems to be very important in this story. Bunch of new characters introduced here, characters that seem to be fairly important. There's also a continuation of a certain story. Now, this is where I get into the slightest of spoilers, but at the same time, not really. So feel free to put your finger over top of the exit key, all right? And if something starts to sound a little bit too spoilery for you, then feel free to click off the video. I understand. Hit that like button right now. Turn the phone sideways and hit like because you love what I do, right? Anyway, but I don't think this is going to be too spoilery. Anyway, we're going to start now. In the Avengers comic books, there was a storyline about sometime last year, like maybe 5 months ago, that wasn't finished. And it involved vampires. It involved Dracula. The second story in this comic book, that's the story where all of that is going to continue. Jason Aaron left that open because Benjamin Percy and Victor Bogdanovic are going to continue with that story here in this book. I am so in love with the idea of that. And this also shows why you need should need certain comic book review stories like mine. And I'm not the only one. But why people like us, the influencers, are so crucial to this. Because anybody who's just looking at this and saying, I'm not interested in Wolverine, suddenly I think you're going to get interested in Wolverine. Because that Dracula story led up to something that's just, hold on. And now Wolverine is going to have to deal with this. Yeah. Also, you learn a lot more about Wolverine. I'm going to show you one more page in here because I think it's actually kind of crucial. I'm not going to show you the final page in here because it would be a spoiler. So I'm not going to show you the final page. I'm only going to show you this. We get to learn more about, what does this word say? Bloodwork. This is the final page on here. Bloodwork. We get to actually look at DNA, RNA, but more specifically, we get to look at the blood types. O, positive, the positive and negatives for these, O, A, B, and AB. Excuse me. And we get to learn that Wolverine's blood, well, we actually get to learn about the healing properties and how it can actually heal others. And there's a lot, like, you need to read this to really get the status quo on here. And I love this. And I can't wait to have a conversation with somebody at some point about all of this. And, oh, man, make sure that you guys tune in for the live chat that I have with you guys on Wednesday night. Actually, so that should be tonight. So tonight, Wednesday night, going into Thursday morning. It'll either be midnight or an hour before. We'll see. But we're going to have that live chat, the Dawn of X live spoiler chat. So you guys get to interact with me and we get to discuss all of the 3 Dawn of X books this week. But his blood type is very important in here and what it can do and how it actually relates to vampire blood. Guys, make sure you read all 3 of these Dawn of X books. Read this comic book also, because I want to be able to engage with you guys in regards to the Dawn of X books, in regards to this particular part also. If your comic book store does not have Wolverine Through the Ages for free, it's not the biggest loss in the world, but there is some cool stuff in here, including something that you should decode. I'll actually reveal all that good stuff, in here. But it's a good book, shows a whole bunch of really cool stuff that, happens in the comic books at some point or another with Wolverine. Key stories. Oh, look, the facsimile cover from last week. Also, why they should have released this book last week, because this time last week was February the 18th. February the 18th is the feast day for St. Julian. I don't know why it wasn't released last week. Go figure. But that's actually fairly important for this book. And I'm going to reveal all that stuff. I'm going to talk all that stuff with you guys tonight. I'll see you there. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Like this stuff and make sure you watch the ads, please, because look at all these videos over here, but watch the ads. That's the only way your favorite YouTubers actually get paid for these videos and all the hard work that we do and the entertainment and joy that we bring you. Just saying. All right, guys, I'm out. Professor Bill, Comic Book University. Class dismissed.